We're doing a deep dive today, and we're really lucky to have some fascinating material to work with.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
Well, we've got this transcript of a talk by Kapil Sibal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he gave it at Manipal University, Jaipur, to a bunch of law students.
So this is like straight from a legal luminary, right? I mean, he is a
Yeah.
senior advocate at the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Wow. And he was Minister of Law and Justice, too.
Right. And worked with, like, the top legal minds in the entire country.
Yeah. So what's he talking about in this thing?
Well, I think what's really cool is, like, he kind of flips the script on how we think about law.
Oh.
He says, law ultimately sets out parameters for relationships. And I don't know, it just makes it so much more, it makes it feel so much more relatable than just a bunch of rules, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really brings it to life. It's about the human element, right?
Yeah.
Like Sibal is really getting at the dynamics between people, individuals, the state, communities, all of it.
Yeah.
And that's like you said, that's what makes it so interesting. But it's also super crucial for lawyers. You can't really argue a case effectively unless you grasp the motivations, the human stories behind the laws themselves.
Right. It's like those child custody laws. He uses that as an example. He was saying how those laws are so deeply rooted in like a mother's role.
Oh, yeah, especially in the early years.
Right. So it's like even in these areas of the law that seem really straightforward, there's all this deeper human stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He really makes you think about law in a whole new way.
Totally. But I mean, okay, let's be honest. Like when you're an aspiring lawyer, you want to know how to be the best. Right.
What's the secret sauce?
What's the recipe?
Yeah.
Well, Sibal actually kind of laughs that off at first and says, I don't have a recipe.
Oh, really?
But then he gets into these qualities that are really important. And I mean, there is no magic formula, right?
Right.
But he gives some foundational principles that are so key.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that he doesn't just give you like a cookie cutter answer.
Me too. It makes you want to know, like, okay, what is he going to say next?
What does he say?
Well, he talks a lot about knowledge.
Knowledge, yeah.
But it's not just legal knowledge. He's talking about history,
Uh-huh.
economics, literature, even.
Wow. Okay, so why would a lawyer need to know about, the Roman Empire or the stock market?
Well, you never know what kind of case is going to end up on your desk.
Right.
Maybe you've got this case about corporate fraud and you need to understand, like, historical economic trends, or who knows, maybe a contract dispute hinges on some piece of literature. It's like the more you know,
Right.
the better advocate you'll be.
The more tools you have in your toolbox.
Exactly.
So what else does he mention?
He talks about equality of opportunity.
Yeah.
And this is where, I don't know, I just get excited about it because it's about justice, you
Right.
know? Sibal explains how law is unique in that everyone in the courtroom, in theory anyway, is starting out with the same information.
Yeah.
It's what you do with it that matters.
So, it doesn't matter if you're, a hotshot lawyer or just out of school. It's all about your skills as a lawyer if you make a good argument.
Totally. Like, you could be a brand new grad going up against some big name, big firm lawyer.
Yeah.
And, like, you have just as much of a shot at winning.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's really cool. So knowledge, the courtroom's a level playing field. What else? Industry?
Yeah. Well, no surprise there.
Right.
But what does he mean by that?
He means putting in the hours,
Oh, yeah.
knowing your case inside and out,
Uh-huh.
and, thinking of every possible argument someone could throw at you.
Right.
There are no shortcuts, basically.
Right. It sounds pretty daunting, honestly.
Right.
And that reminds me, doesn't he tell a story about his first Supreme Court case?
He does. He does. And it really shows those qualities that we just talked about, like all coming together.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. What was he like as a young lawyer?
Okay, so picture this.
Okay.
24 years old,
Okay.
just starting out,
Uh-huh.
barely any experience,
Okay.
takes on this election matter pro bono.
Okay.
And to make it even more intense, the judge who's presiding over the case had just issued a ruling on a very similar issue.
Oh, wow. Talk about intimidating.
So what do you think he did?
I don't know. Did he back down?
Not at all. So he had done all this research, he studied the law meticulously, and he understood the judge's ruling, but he also thought, it doesn't fully grasp, like, the nuances of this legal principle.
Yeah.
So he's got the knowledge.
He seized the opportunity
And he's put in the work.
and he challenged the judge.
Respectfully, of course.
Yeah.
But he had the courage to stand up and make his case.
Wow.
And here's the amazing part.
What?
The judge, after hearing Sibal's argument, actually issued a totally separate judgment acknowledging that his previous ruling was incorrect.
Wow, talk about a victory. That is a great story.
It really is. And I think the reason why it's so impactful is that it really shows, hard work.
Preparation.
And like, even when you're facing these huge obstacles, standing up for what you believe in can have incredible outcomes.
Yeah. That story's really cool. But it also ties into something else he said about understanding the why behind the law, right?
Yes. He said, don't just read the law, understand the human conduct it seeks to regulate.
Right. Like, what's the story? What's the reason it exists?
Exactly.
And if you can grasp that, then you can be a much more effective lawyer.
It's not just about the jargon, it's about the human element.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, what about those laws against corruption? It's not just about the rules. It's about public trust. It's about duty.
Right, right. Or what about those anti-defection laws?
Oh, yeah. Good point.
I mean, those are designed to prevent political opportunism.
Right. Maintaining stability.
Exactly. So by understanding the motivations behind the law, a lawyer can be so much more persuasive.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You make a much stronger argument. You connect with the judge on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And that leads us to another point he makes, which is that the legal landscape is constantly shifting.
Right. It's responding to people's behavior.
Human behavior, always evolving. He gives some good examples, too, like think about custody laws,
Oh, good one.
how those have evolved as we've learned more about childhood development.
Or how politicians are constantly finding ways to get around those anti-defection laws.
Oh, yeah, and potentially destabilizing governments.
Exactly. And it's not just politics, it's everything.
Yeah,
Sibal points out that even though we have all these laws to try and promote equality,
right.
social inequalities still persist.
It's like this dance between the law and human behavior.
I like that.
It's happening all around us.
That is really good. And it makes you realize that law really is alive. It's constantly changing. And it reminds me of what you were saying about the human side of legal practice.
Yeah.
Like Sibal specifically tells young lawyers, be warm, be empathetic.
And really connect with your clients and their situation.
Yes, such a vital point. I mean, if you connect that to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
legal practice is about people, not just principles. It's about connecting to the human story
Yes.
behind every case.
And sometimes maybe that human story shows that the law itself needs to change.
Right. That's where his parachute analogy comes in. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. He talks about these two people jumping out of a helicopter, and
Oh, no.
one of the parachutes doesn't work.
Oh,
And, well,
doesn't end well.
right. But the other person's parachute opens.
Mm-hmm.
They land safely.
Yeah.
And he says, your mind is like that parachute.
Keep it open.
Be open.
Right. Be open to new arguments,
Respect different views.
and you'll land safely in the legal world.
It's such a cool analogy. I love it.
It is a great analogy because it emphasizes the importance of humility, right?
Oh, yeah.
In legal practice,
They're not always right.
you have to be willing to listen.
Adapt.
Yeah. I mean, humility isn't exactly what you usually think of when you think of high-powered lawyers, though, is it?
Well, I think you'd be surprised. Remember, he emphasized pro bono work a lot.
Oh, right.
Giving back, using your skills to help people who can't afford representation.
It's like this ethical dimension to the profession.
It is. It's this duty to society.
It's not just about, winning or making money. It's about using your skills for good.
Now, during the Q&A, the student actually asked him about this, about the differences between the old school way of practicing law
Oh, yeah.
and the modern legal landscape. And this is where Sibal really gets into how the profession is changing.
Yeah, he talks about how young lawyers today
Uh-huh.
are much more aggressive, competitive.
Right.
And I think he even says something about etiquette,
Oh, yeah, he does. He kind of implies that maybe it's affecting the way cases are argued.
Yeah. And how they're decided even.
It's really interesting. So is it even possible to have integrity and still be so aggressive?
Right. Because you need to be driven to succeed in law. It's such a demanding profession.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to lose sight of fairness, respect for the legal process.
Yeah. It seems like he's saying that this shift toward aggression is eroding some of those traditional safeguards. The ones that ensure a fair and impartial judicial system.
Right. Because if lawyers are just focused on winning no matter what,
Yeah.
does that mean truth becomes secondary?
That's a good question. I think what he's getting at is the importance of mentorship.
Yeah.
Because if young lawyers are coming into this hyper-competitive environment without a strong ethical compass, that could have a real impact on the future of the profession.
And really on, whether justice is served.
Right. It's not just about winning.
It's about being a good lawyer.
Right. It's about understanding that your duty goes beyond just your client.
Yeah.
It's about upholding the integrity of the whole legal system.
That's a great point. I think Sibal's really saying that you have to be a good human being, first and foremost.
Yeah. And that message, it goes beyond the legal profession, doesn't it?
Totally.
Empathy, integrity, courage, a willingness to learn. Those are all qualities that can make you a well-rounded person in any field.
And it's a good reminder that even if we're not all lawyers, we can still learn from what he's saying. It's a call to action.
It is.
To think critically about how we can all work towards a more just world.
I think that's a good place to stop for now, actually. We can pick this up in part 2.
Okay.
We'll delve deeper into Sibal's wisdom next time.
Okay, so we're back, and we're continuing this deep dive into the world of advocacy with Kapil Sibal. And I don't know about you, but I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about last time, like how the legal landscape is shifting and how you can balance integrity and service in this new, more aggressive approach to law.
It's definitely something to think about. And Sibal doesn't shy away from the fact that things are changing.
Right.
Like, he points out that just the cost of becoming a lawyer has gone way up compared to when he started.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So it's like you're adding a whole other layer of pressure.
It's not just tuition, it's the cost of living.
Exactly.
In these cities where all the firms are.
Yeah, it's expensive. So, I mean, how does that affect a lawyer's choices?
Well, think about it. Imagine you graduate and you have tons of debt.
Okay, yeah.
It makes sense that you'd be drawn to those areas of law that are more lucrative, even if you're more passionate about something else.
Right. And what about people who can't afford those high fees?
I know. It makes you wonder if justice is really only accessible to the wealthy.
Right.
And I think Sibal's really aware of that. Remember how he talked about pro bono work?
Oh, yeah, he's a big advocate for that.
He actually said that a lot of his work is pro bono, especially for people facing persecution from the state.
That's incredible, really.
It is. I mean, it really shows his commitment to justice, to using his position to help those who need it most.
Yeah.
Kind of goes back to that story about his first case.
Oh, yeah, totally. Taking that on pro bono when he was so young, it shows a real dedication to these principles.
And it ultimately shaped his career. I mean, that case could have easily gone to someone more experienced.
You're right, but he saw an opportunity. And, Sibal talks a lot about seizing opportunities.
Exactly. He had a chance to learn, grow, make a difference.
And it really paid off, didn't it?
It really did. It reminds me of something else he talked about during that Q&A with the student, about the dynamics within the profession itself.
Oh, yeah. He said something about young lawyers being a lot more aggressive and competitive these days.
Yeah. And how that creates a totally different environment in the courtroom.
Right. Like it might even be affecting how cases are argued and decided.
Exactly. And that takes us right back to that tension we were talking about before, The
tension between integrity and this more cutthroat approach to lawyering.
Yeah. Because on the one hand, you need to be ambitious to make it in this field.
Sure.
But you also don't want to lose sight of fairness and respect for the law.
I wonder if what he's worried about is that this aggression is eroding those safeguards that are supposed to make sure the system is fair and impartial.
Yeah.
Like, what if lawyers are so focused on winning that the truth doesn't matter as much anymore?
That's scary. And it makes me think about mentorship.
Mentorship?
Yeah. I mean, if these young lawyers are going into this crazy competitive world without some kind of ethical guidance,
right,
it could really change the whole profession.
It could change the whole idea of justice, really.
Exactly. I think Sibal would say that those more experienced lawyers need to, teach the next generation not just about the law,
right,
but also about ethics.
Yeah, about what it really means to be a good lawyer. Not just a good lawyer, a good person.
Someone who understands that they have a duty to the whole legal system, not just their client.
That's a good point. And I think that's what makes his message so powerful. He's not just talking about the law. He's talking about life, too.
It's about being compassionate.
He's saying that success isn't just about winning. It's about making the world a better place.
That's a good point. And it makes me wonder about his thoughts on the future of the legal profession. With all these changes going on, where does he see things going?
Well, I think that's a good place to pick up in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
We'll talk about Sibal's reflections on the future of law and what it means for lawyers, and really for all of us.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Kapil Sibal's take on the art of advocacy. And last time we were talking about the future of the legal profession, right? Like, where are things headed? What does Sybil see happening?
Well, he doesn't pretend to know everything that's going to happen,
Right.
but he does talk about some interesting trends that are shaping the legal world. And one thing he keeps coming back to is the globalization of law.
Globalization. Okay, I'm not sure I get what that means. What is globalization of law?
Well, I mean, think about it. Legal issues aren't just happening within one country anymore.
Oh,
It's an interconnected world, right?
yeah.
Business, the environment, human rights, it all crosses borders.
So you're saying lawyers can't just focus on the laws of their own country.
Right,
They have to understand what international law.
exactly.
Yeah.
Treaties, how different legal systems work together.
I mean, that makes sense. But
Yeah,
that also sounds really complicated.
I know, it's a lot.
It's hard enough to keep up with my own state's laws.
Well, Sybil's point is that it's both a challenge and an opportunity.
Oh, okay.
It's a chance for lawyers to be real problem solvers,
Yeah.
bridging cultures, finding solutions to these really tough issues.
So it's not just about knowing different laws, it's about understanding different cultures.
Yes, and different ways of thinking about law, even.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Hmm.
And that actually leads into something else he talked about, the role of technology in law.
Technology. So like AI doing legal research?
Yeah, things like that, virtual courtrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But it's even bigger than that.
Oh.
Sybil sees technology changing how lawyers actually think and how they work. Like, he tells young lawyers to embrace these new tools,
Right.
use them to collaborate, to analyze data, to present their arguments better.
I guess it's kind of like what we're doing now, right, with the podcast?
It is. We're using technology to share knowledge in new ways.
Yeah.
And Sybil thinks that technology can actually make the law more accessible for everyone, not just lawyers.
That's a good thing, but are there downsides? Like, could it make things worse for people who are already struggling?
It's a good question. And Sybil says that technology can definitely be a double-edged sword.
Right, right.
It can make the legal system more efficient, but it can also create new forms of exclusion.
So it's not enough to just, use technology. You have to think about how you're using it.
Exactly, and make sure it's serving justice
Yeah.
for everyone. And that brings us back to what Sybil was saying before. No matter how much things change, the fundamentals stay the same. Integrity, empathy, serving justice, that's what matters most.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's globalization or technology or something else.
Right, those are just tools.
And it's up to us to use them the right way.
Exactly. And that's where his advice to those young lawyers is so important. He tells them to be lifelong learners, to be curious, and to never forget about the human side of things.
Be adaptable.
Right?
It's like he's saying being a good lawyer isn't just about skills, it's about who you are as a person.
It's about character. It's about compassion. It's about wanting to make the world a better place.
It's really inspiring.
It is, and I think it's a message for everyone, not just lawyers.
I agree. So to wrap things up, what would you say are the big takeaways from this deep dive?
I think Sybil is challenging us to think about what role law plays in our society and how we can all be a part of making things more just and equitable, especially as the world changes so fast.
He's really saying that the legal profession is about more than just, winning or making money. It's about using your skills to serve others.
And to make a real difference.
That's a great way to put it. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And we hope you'll keep exploring these ideas with us.
Yeah, see you next time.